So RFK Jr., he had his presidential announcement here in Boston. I covered it on the ground. I am sorry for the audio. Eric and I, Eric's my producer. We're figuring some things out. I mean, I have what I have. I don't have the best equipment. I will say the Wi-Fi was kind of finicky also. So that was also an issue. But that being said, I hope you got to see something from the coverage or whatever. But that being said, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's another one that's revealed some uncomfortable truths. And while we were there at his announcement, there was an alarm that went off in the building and it made me a little spooked. I was like, wait a minute, what's happening? While he was speaking, all of a sudden an alarm goes off. We're all just like, what do we do? Voice comes over the intercom and a voice says, there is an emergency in this building. First thing I thought to myself is, that's it. This is how it ends. Right before I got to the announcement, I received messages from people telling me to be very careful going to this event because of the message that he has. And then that alarm went off. But we cannot allow ourselves to be controlled by fear. I thought his speech was pretty decent for the most part. I will say I thought his speech was pretty long. That speech was long. So if I was him, I would cut back on some of the stories and focus more on policy. Some people disagreed. Some people said they really liked hearing all those different stories, right? He made a couple jokes. He said that he's been censored for 18 years, so he has a lot to say. And he did have a lot to say. But one of the things he spoke out about was the military-industrial complex. And I have a clip here that I want to play for you. And I think it's important for people to hear this. Because this is something that I feel even Bernie Sanders didn't go this far. He's kind of to the left of Bernie Sanders on certain issues. He called out the CIA. He called out the military-industrial complex. He called out mass media. He talked about how the media was corrupt. He was willing to call out entities that Bernie Sanders was not willing to do. Bernie Sanders wouldn't even call out the media, and they were smearing him to his face. But there are still some things here that I think he needs to work on, and I'll get to that in just a second. But I want you to hear this clip from him here about the MIC, where he talks about what happened, with his father and his uncle, and he tackles how poverty at home is connected to war abroad.
Military-industrial complex, that destroyed democracy. My father died in his campaign against the Vietnam War. Martin Luther King wrote the civil rights movement on Vietnam, and he said, this has got to be our priority. Because we're not seeing that there's a direct link between poverty at home and war, poverty and violence, oppression at home and war abroad. You cannot separate them. As long as we're taking care of weapons in war, we will never have a middle class in this country.
Okay, so what he said there was, poverty at home is connected to war abroad. He did tackle the war issue very well. And he had a message about Russia and Ukraine that I think actually made sense. I felt like it was pretty logical and fair. That statement is also on his campaign website. I think you should just go read that because, like I said, my audio was not the best. So I apologize. It's too late to apologize. Anywho, he talked about those things. And there are a couple of things I do want to say. There were two examples where I felt like he does want to have like one foot on one side and one foot on the other side at the same time. One was with the CIA and one was with the Democratic Party. One of the things that he said is that, the Democratic Party is a problem. But then he went on to say that he wants to take the Democratic Party and change it and take it back to what it was when his father was a part of it and when his uncle was a part of it. He believes that he can reform it. You guys know I don't believe that. I don't believe you can reform the Democratic Party. The other statement that he made was in reference to the CIA. He talked about how the CIA is problematic, right? He talked about how they've had their hands in things that they should not have. He called out the Bay of Pigs. He also called out where he felt like his uncle JFK made some mistakes. But then he went on to say that one of the leaders of his campaign is his daughter-in-law, who is former CIA. And it may be your daughter-in-law, but she still was a part of the CIA. So this is not to say you have to disown your daughter-in-law, but I would not have a former CIA official a part of my campaign. So that was another thing that I was kind of like, yeah, you can't have both ways. So for me, I was like, no. But he appeared on Tucker Carlson recently where he talked about socialism for the rich. And I want you to hear this. I didn't know Tucker Carlson was going to be on here this much, but I want you to hear two different ways that he's presented to the public. I want you to listen to him on Tucker Carlson. Then I'm going to show you what they said about him on CNN. And then I'm going to show you what Reuters, is it Reuters or Reuters? Whatever. Reuters wrote about these presidential candidates. That article is being smeared all over Twitter. We're all just like, this is an outright lie. But I want to present both sides because I want you to see how he's being presented to the masses from different media outlets. So let's get into this one.
And we are honored to have him on our show tonight. He joins us now. Bobby, thanks so much for coming on. So you are, of course, being dismissed as a vaccine nut, but watching your announcement today, it wasn't about pharma even so much as it was about America's place in the world and what do we do about it. If you wouldn't mind summarizing for our viewers where you think we are and what you think we ought to do.
That point right there, I forgot to mention, and that was true. For all the people saying, oh, he's this crazy, like barely talked about that. Barely.
Well, I gave a long speech, Tucker, and thank you again for having me on.
Of course.
And for that very kind of an introduction. I think that the general theme of my speech was this corrupt merger of state and corporate power, which is turning our country into a corporate kleptocracy, into a system of socialism for the rich, and this kind of a cushy socialism for the rich, and this kind of brutal, merciless capitalism for the poor.
Now, see, that was something that Bernie Sanders said. Remember, Bernie Sanders talked about the socialism for the rich. So there's a couple of issues that Bernie Sanders had that I feel like he does agree with, but I still feel like he takes it a step further. I think that's a big difference. And if you haven't had a chance to do so, please answer that poll because we'll present the poll results at the end of this.
It keeps us in a state of war. It bails out banks at the same time that last month, the United States government told 30 million people it was cutting their their food stamp checks by 90%.
Yeah.
It took 15 million people off of Medicare. The same month, it gave $300 million to the Silicon Valley Bank and tapped up the cost of the Ukraine war to $113 billion.
Three things that he did right there that I think is very important. Number one, he called out the banks. That's a big one with me. Call them out. He called out the banks. He talked about the money that's been sent over to Ukraine. And he talked about what the American people have lost while everybody else is getting all this money. Working class people and poor people, let's talk about what they're losing right now, right? Healthcare. Dental care too. I might have to add that one for Sunday's stream. Dental care, as if your teeth don't matter. So that was important.
We're sending $113 billion to the Ukraine. The entire budget of EPA is $12 billion. The budget of CDC is $11 billion. We have 57% of American citizens could not put their hands on $1,000 if they have an emergency. A quarter of our citizens are hungry. So we're cutting welfare and food stamps by 90%. And we're paying, and we're bailing out the bankers. We're paying for a war that, we can't afford.
Bailing out the bankers. Again, that's a big one. Keep talking about the banks. I feel like this was something that Bernie touched on that during his 2016 campaign, but I felt like the 2020 campaign, which I felt like was more commercialized, I feel like he didn't focus on that. And that's really important for people to understand, because even when the banks have a banking crisis, we covered this the other day, right? Even when the banks have a banking crisis, rich people who have money in those banks, they're still okay. They tend to do well. Silicon Valley Bank, what did they do? People who had the deposits, $250,000 over, they're protected. Everybody else, you're screwed. So you have to continue to call out the banks.
And with the way that we do this is by printing money. We've printed 10 centuries of money in the last 14 years. And that caused the inflation, which raises food, which is a tax on the poor. So, we've raised food prices for basic foods like chicken, dairy, and milk by 76%.
Now, people who are followers of MMT, modern monetary theory, would disagree with him here about printing the money.
In the last 2 years, and now we're cutting people's food stamps and bailing out banks the same month. It doesn't make any sense. And we need to get rid of this kind of corporate control of our government. It comes from our democracy is devolving into kind of a corporate plutocracy.
So that's another thing. He's acknowledging that the government is controlled by the corporations. That's a big key. I'm gonna have to get him to work on the money thing though, because this thing about the government printing money, the government does print money. MMT would tell you that this would not be an issue, basically.
I would think that what you just said, and I'll just be honest, I agree with most of it. But even if I didn't, I would think, boy, that's a really interesting thing to say. You have a coherent worldview. You've written a lot of books on these topics. You've clearly thought about it. You're not in it for the money. So don't these issues deserve a wide hearing before the public entering a presidential year? It seems to me that they do.
I would think they would, and particularly the issues of war. And, my son went over and fought in the Ukraine. As I said today, I think people, the major doyens, sort of diplomatic, the most respected diplomatic gurus like Henry Kissinger and Jack Matlock and Larry Wilkinson have all said the Ukraine war is a huge problem for our country because from a geopolitical standpoint, it's driving the Russians close to the Chinese, which is the worst thing for us. But we're there for the right reasons because we have tremendous compassion for the Ukrainian people and the illegal invasion, the brutality, and also their valor and their courage. My own son was serving over there. He joined a special forces unit as a machine gunner. He fought in the Kharkiv offensive. Americans care about the underdog. They care about that kind of suffering. But the question is, why are we in the Ukraine? Because Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, said that we're there to exhaust the Russians.
This piece here is very important for the people who think we're just there to help the people. You need to listen to this part right here.
Defense said that we're there to exhaust the Russians. President Biden has said that we're there to deplatform, to depose Vladimir Putin. And if that's why we're there, and we're killing a lot of Ukrainians as pawns in a proxy war between two great powers.
In other words, regime change. In other words, we're there to implement regime change in Russia. And that is definitely not the narrative that's being delivered by the State Department to the American people at all. Not through mainstream media, not through White House press briefings at all.
Here's one last thing I would say. Nobody talks about this. There's 14,000 Ukrainian civilians who have died, but 300,000 troops. The Russians are killing Ukrainians at a 7-to-1 to 8-to-1 ratio. They cannot sustain this. What we're being told about this war is just not true.
And let's remember what they continue to tell us. They're willing to fight to the last Ukrainian. That means if all of them die, the US government still does not care. They don't care about the people. That's what I'm trying to make people understand. They don't care about the women and the children. If they're willing to fight to the last Ukrainian and all of those people die and their economy is ruined after this war, then you will know that what this war was really about was to implement regime change in Russia. That's what it was really about. Let's not fall into this camp of we're there to help the women and the children. It really bothers me when people say that, because if you were trying to help those women and children, you wouldn't be bombing them.
No, it's not true. And I would hope, despite the fact you criticize their advertisers, other media outlets would have enough respect for our country and for its voters to give what you said a hearing, because I think it's really important. And we're, again, grateful that you came on our show tonight. You're always welcome. Bobby Kennedy Jr., thank you.
So my critique in reference to the media and his candidacy is that if you disagree with him, bring him on for the conversation. That is the right thing to do. What is not the right thing to do is this. Now, shout out to Case Study QB for this clip, because CNN and MSNBC, they're continuing to smear RFK Jr., but they won't bring him on for the conversation. I want you to listen to what they say here. They're going to go as far as to say that even discussing him is dangerous. That's how crazy this is.
Anti-vaccine activist Robert F. Kennedy Jr. launching a bid for the 2024 Democratic presidential election today. He's already facing a big hurdle. He lacks support from prominent members of his own famous Democratic family. During his speech in Boston, he described himself as a truth teller.
My mission over the next 18 months of this campaign and throughout my presidency will be to end the corrupt merger of state and corporate power that is threatening now to impose a new kind of corporate feudalism on our country.
But see, that shows you how bad the Wi-Fi was. I saw your message. JS says that video quality is like it's from 2006 or something. And this is on CNN. So this is what I was trying to tell you guys. That's how bad the Wi-Fi quality was, right? So I see it wasn't just me. Yeah, I know. All right, let's go back.
And though he invoked his father and uncle, Kennedy was forced to acknowledge his estrangement from some members of his family over his incendiary rhetoric. Back with me now, Elsie Granderson and Alyssa Farrow-Griffin. Okay, Alyssa, your thoughts?
Let me tell you something about the estrangement from the family. You know, I don't know. Maybe this is like a thing for like older generations. But what I want people to understand is like people like my generation, millennials and Gen Z, and it's actually not that uncommon to not be in touch with all of your family. I just want people to understand that, especially for those of us that are millennials, because we tend to move and hop around so that we can try to make more money so that we can live. That's how real it is out here. But that's actually not that uncommon. Like I know people come around the time for the holidays, they're not really close with their family like that, like they used to be. So when they make these comments and they say, oh, his family is not on board with this and he's estranged from I'm just kind of like, and that's just my take on it. I'm just like, so what?
Keep an eye on this. So there's a USA Today Suffolk poll that had him at 14%, which I think is incredibly high. I think you hear the name Kennedy and the average voter, push voter voting in this is not even sure which Kennedy to associate it with. Also something to keep an eye on.
They're not sure which Kennedy to associate it with. Who would we confuse it for? Who would we confuse? This is the part that's funny to me. We're not sure which one is. Okay, let's see who's around. You got Joseph Kennedy III, who lost. He tried to primary challenge Ed Markey. That was a disaster. Now he has no seat. Okay. He was in the House. And then he tried for the Senate seat. That's a whole nother story. Anyway, and then you have RFK Jr., right? In reference to politics. She's like, oh, I don't know. People are trying to figure out which Kennedy this. I don't think people are trying to figure that out. I'm sorry. I can't.
In this, Steve Bannon's been hyping him on his War Room podcast, as well as Roger Stone.
And is that a maneuver? I mean,
I think it is a maneuver,
or he's trying to just disrupt him.
I think it's an effort to disrupt and to try to take votes away from Joe Biden. And of course, right now he's running as a Democrat, but there's nothing to say that he wouldn't try to run as some kind of a third party challenger in a potential, Trump Biden head to head. Not a serious person, but we do know there's an anti-vax sentiment in this country. I'm sure that will help get him some votes. But
notice how she said he's not a serious person. Define serious person. Why is he not a serious person? And Joe Biden is a serious person. Let's think about this. Joe Biden's serious. Joe Biden can't string together a sentence right now. Let's go on. I hate the media smears.
Yes, it's concerning.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with anyone deciding they want to run for president, with the exception of the twice, impeached ex-president. Everyone else, I don't have a problem with. I do think, though, however, what this does do is sort of remind Democrats, if you will, that, President Biden hasn't officially announced yet. And while all things that I've seen in my own personal reporting, plus other reports from other reporters in D.C., is that, for all intents and purposes, he's going to run. But there is this vacuum here. And if you're someone who, not quite sure what to do with your political future and you want to raise up your profile, why not run for president? I mean, did Beto O'Rourke really have a chance of being president? No, of course not. But it kept his issues out there and the things that he was concerned with. It kept those conversations going because he was running for president. So if Mr. Kennedy is really...
Look at how she's looking at him. Hold on. Look at her facial expression. Right there. Look at how she's looking at him. She's like, oh, no, don't you say that.
I mean, did Beto O'Rourke really have a chance of being president? No, of course not. But it kept his issues out there and the things that he was concerned with. It kept those conversations going because he was running for president. So if Mr. Kennedy is really serious as an anti-vaxxer, this allows him a platform running for president to continue to push those views.
I do.
Notice how they're ignoring all the other positions that he's running on. They're just focusing on that position. That's on purpose. But let me say something really quick. I don't think this is going to be the turnoff in the way that they think it will be. Some people may hear that and be like, oh, okay, I can get down with that. Some people who are in the states that were locked down like mine are kind of like, oh, yeah, you know what? He may have a point. A lot of people lost their businesses here because of the lockdowns. And then you may have some of the younger people that's like, he's based. Some people might like that. This is the whole thing. Like with Bernie Sanders, you thought they would have learned this by now. When they tried to turn people off from Bernie Sanders and say, he's a socialist. I mean, he's going to turn the country into Cuba and Venezuela. Younger people were like, based.
Worry that we're going to have candidates on both the right and the left, though, who are running on such extreme platforms. I mean, he represents something that, especially in a post-pandemic era, I think is wildly dangerous, some of the things that he's espoused. And on the right, we've seen some extreme positions being taken. I'm hoping we see both fields consolidate quickly, and I do think it's incumbent on the president to announce.
She's talking really fast, but I want you to hear this part where she says dangerous.
On such extreme platforms. I mean, he represents something that, especially in a post-pandemic era, I think is wildly dangerous, some of the...
Wildly dangerous. What's wildly dangerous? Are you in danger, guys? Who says it's wildly dangerous? This is just weird to me. The words they're using, danger, not a serious person, not serious, danger. Concerning
things that he's espoused. And on the right, we've seen some extreme positions being taken. I'm hoping we see both fields consolidate quickly. And I do think it's incumbent on the president to announce sooner rather than later.
But I mean, are you saying that you think that if
this part right here, 219, 3 members of his family denounce his jab views. 2021 Instagram takes down his account for repeatedly sharing debunked claims about the jab and the pandemic. Also in 2021, clashes with family members after calling for release of his father's assassin, Sirhan Sirhan. 2022 invokes Nazi Germany in an anti-jab speech in Washington, D.C. These things right here They're not detailed. And it's important that you understand the context of them. And this is why I say, if they want to know why he made these statements, then invite him on and have the discussion. What's so hard about that? What are they afraid of? Just like they didn't want to talk to Bernie Sanders. If you want to know why he said what he said, invite him on and talk to him about it. But the family stuff, 1 and 2, like, this is not a gotcha. This is not a gotcha for like people's like, look, they really think everybody's like close and lovey-dovey with their family members and stuff like that. A lot of younger people are not. That's what I'm trying to tell you. A lot of people, you got the kids live over in Seattle. The parents are in like Georgia. Okay. How often are they seeing their parents? How often are they seeing their grandparents? The idea of the American family, including the relatives that are, it's more like the non-immediate, the non-immediate family members, like the ones that are not your immediate family. This idea of these days where the large family is gatherings still continue and everybody's still together and everybody sees each other multiple times a year, that has not been my experience as I've gotten older, not as a millennial. Hell, you got people living all over the place. Some people on the West Coast, some people on the East Coast. I didn't grow up in one town my whole life, not one state my whole life. I've moved around my entire life. So I don't even know where some of my relatives are. Shit. I'm sorry, but I don't know. I don't think that's a gotcha.
Joe Biden announced that he is running for re-election. Robert Kennedy Jr. wouldn't get in?
No, I'm just saying there's a vacuum right now. There's no movement in terms of 2024 in terms of a Democrat, right? This is actually the first time you've heard someone running as a Democrat for 2024, right? So this is like, oh, that's right. We do need to gear up for the primaries. We do need to do these things. And while I don't expect President Biden to find himself being primary by established Democrats, it is important to continue to have these conversations that are outside the sphere of liberalism in order to push agendas or policies forward for the real debates, right? Because eventually at some point, someone's going to talk about COVID, someone's going to talk about vaccines, and you got to have answers, and this is good batting practice.
It's really interesting to hear what you say, that name recognition gets you that far already.
You have to imagine, I mean, just when I saw that poll, that's got to be the fact that his last name's Kennedy and that
not necessarily. Not just necessarily because his last name is Kennedy, because that if that were the case, then Joseph Kennedy III would have mopped the floor with Ed Markey. If that were the case, Joseph Kennedy III would have won that race hands down. He lost. Even the younger people supported Ed Markey. He thought his name was going to carry him over the threshold too. That did not work. That name did not work. It is not as, it doesn't hold as much power as it used to. And people have to understand that. I live right here in Massachusetts, and I'm here to tell you, yes, they are really beloved here in Massachusetts, but the name does not hold as much power as it used to. That's why when Joseph Kennedy III lost, it was such a big deal. She just looks so uncomfortable.
poll, that's got to be the fact that his last name's Kennedy and that people are like, which one is it? I'm not totally sure.
And he's got the same name.
Is it Joe Kennedy, who great moderate former member in the House? I think there's an element of confusion there. He does have kind of.
There's no element of confusion. Joe Kennedy has fireball red hair. He lost. Okay. He ran for Senate and he lost. These guys do not look alike. Eric, if you can find me a picture, if you can pull up a picture, we already got a picture of RFK. Can you pull up a picture of Joseph Kennedy III? Because I want to show people they don't look alike.
A cult-like following, similar to when Marianne Williamson, where there are people who will kind of follow them, you know, regardless of the viability of the campaign. But to get him to that sort of a number seems surprisingly high to me.
Alyssa, LZ, thank you both.
That's because you live in a bubble. He does. He does. Yes, he does. Yeah, that didn't work out too well for him. If you see a picture, let me know when you see the picture, Eric. I'm going to go to this article. Are you doing that? Okay. I want to shout out this. This is really funny. And then I'm going to go to that article, what Reuters was doing. Eric said, remember Uncle Freddie? Nope. No, like this is, I'm sorry, but it's just, I don't remember all these people. Like, thanks, Eric. So explain this to me, guys. Let me see where my typing C is. Okay, here we go. Like, these guys do not look alike. Like, what? This is Joseph Kennedy III. You always remember him because he's the one with the red hair. He don't look like the rest of them like that. He don't. So how you gonna confuse? Where is let me bring up RFK Jr. really quick. Is he still on this picture? Let me go back so you can see. Hold on. Pause there. So that's RFK Kennedy, or excuse me, RFK the Jr., right? Okay. Now let's go back to Joseph Kennedy III. Go back to him. How they look alike? They don't even look alike. He was against cannabis. I know, gamer. I know. And he wonders why he lost. That was a big mistake. I was like, are you kidding me? It's legal here. I'm not looking at the comments anymore. Blue Moon said, what the stop? Okay. Moving on to that article. We're not going to read the whole article. I'm just going to show you something. So Reuters, right? Even they're playing games. 2024 U.S. presidential election, who's in, who's out, and who is still thinking about it. Watch this. So, of course, they show Joe Biden, right? Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, although he is not announced, but they assume he will. Nikki Haley, Tim Scott. Tim Scott has announced that, well, he hasn't announced, but it has been announced that he has an exploratory committee. So that's why he's here. But listen, I'm gonna show you what they do, right? Asa Hutchinson, Mike Pence, I don't think he's running. Chris Christie, who I also don't think is running, says he might be possible. Chris Sununu, Vivek Ramaswamy. That's a pretty cool name. Vivek Ramaswamy. Okay, watch this. You guys notice something? Notice how his name, the font is large and it's bold. All of their names are like that, right? Now watch this. We get to RFK Jr. Why is his font smaller? And notice that his name is not bold. That's intentional. You couldn't copy and paste. Come on, I write too. You just copy and paste, and then you change the name. So you see what they did? Look, even when we get to Mike Pompeo, notice again, the font is larger. Whoops. The font is larger and it's bold. When you get to RFK Jr.'s name, the font is smaller right up here and it's not bold. Why is that done? So that you'll skip right over it. Doesn't stand out. I called this out on Twitter by the day. I tagged Reuters and let them know what's up with this. What is up with that? And then here's the other thing. Mike Pompeo is not running. He announced he's not running. They even put here he's not running. So why do you even have him here? You put someone's name in bold that's not even running, but you didn't put the person's name in bold that is running, and you made the font smaller. I don't think that was an accident, especially since it was only his name. Then you got Glenn Youngkin. I tell you guys, I noticed this shit. Look, this is new. That was not there earlier. bunch of people were calling it out on Twitter. Marianne's name was not in this article. They left it out. In fact, let me see if I can find it. They have her there now. But notice they still have not corrected RF Kennedy Jr.'s name. They still won't put it in bold and the font is still small. If anyone's watching, if you know his campaign team, you might want to let them know about that. Maybe if they get pushback from them, maybe things will change. But let me go to that Twitter. I'm going to take you to the Twitter because I want to show you. Oh, that was me. I should have just went back. Crap. How do I get back? No. Sorry, this isn't my Twitter account, so I want to show you right there. Because see, I noticed, look, something I noticed about Reuters' recent article about presidential candidates. Number one, Marianne isn't even listed. She was not listed there. Two, RFK Jr.'s name is not bold and has a smaller font when compared to other names listed. This is why people don't trust media. And there's my little screenshot there. And then there's Mike Pompeo. See what I'm saying? Sabby noticed these things. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm nosy. But I noticed it. And you can see the comments. Here's Nico, and Mike Pompeo isn't even running. Like, it's just, Pompeo is not running. See, look. Let's go to that poll, Eric. Jesus. All right. So how did you guys vote? If you had to vote for Marianne or RFK, who would you vote? 2% say Marianne as a Democrat. 5% say Marianne as indie third party. 20% say RFK Jr. as a Democrat. And 73% say RFK Jr. as independent or third party. Okay, and that's 609 votes.